Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
And what is going on, everyone? It is Tuesday night, and you are tuned in for a new edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative editor-in-chief. To my left, your right, do not adjust your dials. It is not our pop culture connoisseur, Tom. It is our head of NI Wrestling and also Nerd Initiative Bullpen member, Rich from the 3FM podcast.
That is right. I am here again, and this time, it doesn't technically have anything to do with wrestling. However, that can all change. We'll wait for that later. However, I will say this. I am here because I am honored to be the person who reviewed the Pedestrain for its entire run at Nerd Initiative. And so I was not missing this interview for anything. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, exactly, because we are big fans of the Pedestrain. And we also will just segue because the trade paperback is out in stores right now. So you definitely want to go pick that up after you go and sign up for a brand new Zoop campaign, because it is a fantastic new series from the writer of said Pedestrain book. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Joey Esposito. Joey,
Hello.
What's going on?
It's so great to be here. I'm here with my 100% nerdified Nerd Initiative pint glass, which I can't thank you enough for. I have my hat somewhere nearby as well. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I was going to say you should have announced him as the two-time Nerd Initiative Nerdsy winner or Cheersy winner.
Cheersy was, yes.
Two-time. Three-time overall if you count everything for the.
I'm honored. I count everything. I know that Sean got an award, but I'll take a little credit. That's cool.
No, absolutely. Like I say, the praise is definitely worth it because The Pedestrian is a great book. And so is the new one that is out now on Zoop for the campaign, going for another 21 days, I believe. And that is a very uniquely titled book, The SH TKICKERS, as we'll say.
For a moment, at least.
For a moment. And yeah, so let's get into this book, which is available right now. The QR code link to go sign up is in the liner notes of the show, but we also have it in the corner here. So definitely go click on that. So Joey, how did this whole story come to be?
This has been in the works since we started working on it in 2021. And, it came from an idea that I've always loved thinking about. If you look at the Green Lantern Corps and you think about all the weird distant world outposts that must exist, and just being posted on some backwater world and just doing nothing, and just not being in Hal Jordan's little clique and part of the action. And what's that like, just being posted somewhere distant. So that was the germ of the idea. And then of course we turned it into a creator-owned thing. And so it's just about sort of this organization called the Cosmic Protection Bureau, and sort of a hotshot young space cop, basically, who gets reassigned after doing some not so great things in the eyes of the CPB. Gets reassigned to what we call the bowels of the precinct, which is sort of the home planet of the CPB. And it's, it's a 20-minute elevator ride down into the bowels of the planet. And he's partnered with a grizzled old vet named Skiz, who just does not take any shite from anyone. But really, it's a really high octane, dick joke kind of book that's very fun and very out of control. But at the center of it, it's really an anti-fascist story and about, this kid, a kid really, he's probably about 18, who's indoctrinated into this organization through these propaganda comics that they put out. They're very Silver Agey, kind of, they're romanticizing the glory of the CPB, and he's brought in thinking this is a great destiny, and the CPB is benevolent and doing all this great stuff. But really at the core of it, they're rotten from the inside. And so this book is sort of his journey realizing that, thanks to the help of his new partner. And, there's some cosmic conspiracy going on, and her whole backstory, it plays into it in a big way. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's very silly. It's very cartoony, but hopefully at the core of it, there's an important message.
So I think we're in the clear now. So the whole thing is as we're listening to like your overview of what Shit Kickers is, we got familiar with everything from the Pedestrian, and then you have this book with Shit Kickers. And the one thing that commonly links these books together is that they're unique to an aspect of you're not doing the traditional, run of comic book, aka superhero, or even like some other genres. You're kind of mixing some things up. And my question to you is, do you find yourself more comfortable like doing like kind of walking to your own beat of like doing these awesome like I don't know how to say like they are heroes, but non-traditional books. Is that something that you find freeing and uplifting, or is it just something that you just have a niche for?
I think that it's just kind of where I lean in general. Like I don't feel like I intentionally try to set out to like do something that's like a little bit different from the norm. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because that makes me feel like I'm doing an okay job, like the last thing I wanted to be is just like another book on the shelf. You know what I mean? So I definitely think that I'm interested in sort of presenting an idea, whether it's the Pedestrian or Shit Kickers or anything else. Like I have this cool idea, and then people will be like, how are you going to make a book out of that? And I just want to be like, I'll show you. And that's sort of like where I'm coming from with a lot of this stuff, because I feel like, Shit Kickers had a journey similar to the Pedestrian, in which we pitched it a lot of places. It did have a publisher at one point that, for reasons I won't get into, like the publisher imploded, and I was just kind of like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do this myself. But similar to the Pedestrian, that people just didn't really get it at the pitch phase. And then I think we showed that, like, we had a plan and we knew we could execute it. It just took the right publisher to kind of like trust us to do that. And in the case of Shit Kickers, it's just the publisher trusting us to do that is me and ourselves. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm definitely interested in sort of the offbeat kind of hero characters, but I don't know that I intentionally set out to do that, because I also love traditional superhero stuff. I've done a little bit of stuff at DC, and that's like such an honor and a blast for me. But I also think it's important to dissect that a little bit and, look at a sort of more, I don't want to say realistic, because Shit Kickers is it's very Looney Tunes,
Yeah.
But just looking at it through a different lens, I think is important.
Well, it's funny that you said that about the pitch, because my pitch for everybody for Pedestrian, and it would probably also be the same for Shit Kickers, is it's different and it's awesome. So just read it.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that I don't know if that works. Like if going to a pitch meeting, I don't know if I would win you the pitch saying that, but like to readers of comics, I think that that's the perfect pitch. Is literally it's different, it's awesome. You need to read it.
I have actually said that to a few creators that we've had the pleasure of talking with, because we've been mentioning about the Pedestrian, because we're all obviously very big fans of it here, and especially with this book too, because it is quirky, it's different, but it still has a lot of heart. And like you touched upon too, this is the one under your Soup Dad Comics label. So I mean, and like you alluded to, it's like very DIY, very hands-on. Like this is all on you. Like, how did this whole banner come to be?
So Soup Dad Comics, first of all, Soup Dad is it's an inside joke between myself and like the friends, my closest friends that I grew up with since like childhood, so explaining it gonna sound really stupid, but trust me when I say it's hilarious, and that's what it's a reference to. But really it's all about, like, Soup Dad to me is about making cool shit with your friends. And so what I have been aiming to do with Soup Dad is just to make it as fun and as true to us as possible, doing exactly what we want to do, designing it as we want to design it, The people that I'm working with are great and people who I trust and work with outside of Soup Dad. So, like our designer, for example, who put together the cover trade dress and all that stuff is Carlos Mangual, who I worked with on some Batman stuff. And so like bringing these people in who I've worked with in other capacities and just like making our own little label almost, the editor on the book is my best friend since 7th grade. So
nice.
The person who designed the Soup Dad logo is a very close friend of mine for 15 years, so it's just like, even if they're not traditionally working in comics, it's people who have skill sets, whether it's graphic design or the Shit Kickers trailer that we made is an old colleague of mine from when I worked at Paramount, and using their skill sets to just work on something that we're passionate about, that is our own thing, instead of, working on some corporate project or whatever it might be. So that's really what Soup Dad kind of means to me. And I've been using it for a while. The first official Soup Dad comics thing was actually Sean Von Gorman and I's Pawn Shop. Yeah, so we kickstarted that originally before it had a publisher. And so the self-published version of that was under Soup Dad Comics. But this is sort of like a new relaunch, so to speak, of Soup Dad, and just a more intentional kind of experiment to just put stuff out under our own banner, on our own terms, in our own way. And yeah, it's, the market is wild right now, and it's very difficult for creator-owned comics specifically. And I keep saying, they've sort of, not comics specifically, but the tech industry, I guess, they've sort of built this mousetrap that we're all trapped in. And the only way to like get out of it is just to do your own thing. And I'm not expecting this to be the next Image imprint or anything like that. This is purely just for me and my friends. And, if the only copies of Shit Kickers that get printed are the ones that come out through the Zoop campaign, I'm cool with that, because it means we did it on our own terms and we got it out there in the way that we could. And I think that's something worth celebrating,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to do the DIY mentality and really go against the grain, so to speak, but it's getting your vision, your passion out there. And like win, lose, or draw, it's a win to just get it there. And especially too, like you touched upon, like the market is a very crazy place these days.
Yeah.
But just to get something out there that, it doesn't maybe fit a mold, so to speak, but it is your vision, your heart there, and getting it out. I mean, that is the essential of just being DIY and just going against the grain and just saying like, hey, it's here, take it or leave it. But still, I made this happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like, this is mine, success or failure, or I should say this is ours, success or failure. Like if it falls on us, and that's great if people are into it. And if they're not into it, that's also cool. There's so much stuff out there beyond just the traditional publishers. You look at, the Kickstarter market, for example. Kickstarter is great. There's so many like sort of like erotica comics and all these things that like aren't really supported in the traditional market, but people are finding audiences for them elsewhere. And I think that's awesome. Even if it's not your thing, at least it still exists someplace.
Absolutely. And I mean, nowadays, crowdfunding has become a really important part of comics in particular. As you pointed out, like everybody can go to, get it on Kickstarter or other crowdfunding sites. So what made you go with Zoop over like doing this book on Kickstarter or anywhere else per se?
So I met some of the folks from Zoop at New York Comic Con. And really what started it was, I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Copland's Full Tilt, which is a book that was crowdfunded on Zoop last year. But Jason is someone who I've followed as long as I can remember, but he was working on this like black and white future noir graphic novel called Full Tilt for years, and like following him on social media and just seeing his updates, and he's doing like 20-page spreads and like just crazy shit that he's just like I'm making exactly the thing that I want to make, and I'm just going to not worry about the rest of it. I'm just going to make it. And then eventually it came to Zoop and was very successful. And I have the book, on my shelf over here, and it's beautiful. And talking to him about his experience, and he had only positive things to say. And I just really like that Zoop is specific to indie comics and just really encouraging of creators enacting their vision for whatever book they are producing. And also, like, logistically speaking, I've run a few Kickstarters. It's so much work. It's a full-time job. It's very stressful. And I just felt like I did not have the capacity to do that. And Zoop is very helpful in, we send them assets, they build the page, they handle a lot of the customer service elements and the fulfillment, and dealing with the printer and other vendors for other rewards like our stickers and enamel pins and things like that. So just logistically speaking, it was a huge help. And I liked them, and I liked what they're trying to do for indie comics. So I thought that this felt like the perfect project to kind of test the waters with Zoop. And even though I think their reach is limited compared to Kickstarter, I felt like the trade-off of the amount of responsibility they're taking on versus what I felt I could give was worth it. So far so good. We launched a week ago today, basically, and we're 2/3 of the way there. So I feel confident that we'll get there, and we'll see what happens after that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's awesome to hear, because especially like going into these campaigns, like what would you say is the biggest pro and con of doing a campaign like this?
I think the pro is definitely that you succeed or fail on your own merits, right? Like you are sort of marketing within your budget or within your reach as a creator. And it's really down to like if people are vibing with your book or not. So like we're giving away Shit Kickers #1 on Global Comics for free. So you can read it, the entire issue, for free. And then, you can go check it out in Zoop and back the first 2 issues. And the cons are that, like, the reach is less. Getting it into comic shops is tougher. There are retailer bundles on Zoop, but retailers have more than enough to deal with, especially in light of the Diamond bankruptcy and all this stuff. Like, they're already operating on these razor thin margins, so it's like it's tough to get into the hands of traditional retailers or readers who maybe aren't online all the time and like aware of these sort of campaigns. Like they show up at the comic shop and see what's on the shelf, and that's what they're buying. So it's harder to get a larger reach, I would say, with a crowdfunding campaign. And of course there are exceptions. Like there are crowdfunding campaigns who end up being published through Image for the trade paperback or whatever it might be. But yeah, I would say that's the hardest part of it, is that it's sort of all on you, which is both a positive and a negative, right? Because you're reaping the benefits if something goes well, but also like if there's a delay or just things go awry, then that's also your responsibility. And there are plenty of stories of Kickstarters that are late or people who feel like they got ripped off and all that sort of thing. And so that's definitely a concern. But I will say for Shit Kickers, we're working on issue 6 right now. So issues 1 through 5 are basically done. Issues 1 and 2 specifically, which the Zoop campaign is for, is ready to go to the printer. So as soon as like the campaign's over, we have the funds, we can send it off and start fulfilling those orders. But that's not always the case with crowdfunding, and it can be tough,
Oh yeah, I mean, because especially, with the market too, like you touched upon, and it's just, people are being very, cautious with their dollars, so to speak. Like, and you really want to make sure you get behind a campaign that you can invest in and you get your money's worth. And even from what I've seen from the campaign here, it's like you definitely are gonna get your money's worth too. And I definitely have to throw up the graphic too, because we actually have the variant covers here.
Mm.
Declan Shelby and Seth the Moose there, and these look absolutely incredible. When you brought this project up to those guys, what was their reaction?
They were great. Andrea Schiavone, who is the co-creator and artist on Shit Kickers, like huge fan of Declan and Seth, and so like bringing it to them, of course you're like, here's my book. Do you want to do a variant cover? But both of them having like really positive things to say. Declan thought the title was hilarious, which is really the goal.
Yes.
And Seth really enjoyed the story and the characters. So like getting that positive feedback on its own was like really nice just to hear from creators who I've admired for so long. But then like seeing their interpretation of our characters, there's nothing better. I feel like, I felt this on Pedestrain too, getting the variants from Mike Allred and Dean Haspiel and all the fantastic artists that we've had involved. Like, it's hard to explain the like the holy shit moment of seeing like one of your favorite artists interpret a character that you created or co-created. There's no feeling like it. And I felt that for sure with Shit Kickers. And yeah, they were great. They were really excited, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. And you can only get them through the Zoop campaign, so I'm hoping that's incentive for people to come and back us.
Yeah, I was already got my money for that. So, but I just like seeing that. And seeing how it like to get that accolation. I mean, I think it's just a reflection of the work you've been putting in.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, to get artists to jump in like this and they immediately vibe off that, but they can definitely tell like you've been putting the work in over the time, and obviously now especially too is like coming off the heels of Pedestrain, like that's definitely got a lot more eyes on you, and it's only going to go from here. And I really feel like the more people are hearing about this campaign is even going to skyrocket even more.
I hope so.
I will say, even though generously I've gotten to actually read these books, which is awesome. I also paid for them as well. And the other statement that is there is I'm always this kind of tie in what I was going to say before I asked the question is like I review a lot of indie comics. That's what I do at Nerd Initiative, and I find that I'm drawn to that. I always forget, like especially when we were talking about how people get their comics, I always forget that not everybody like seeks out like different things.
Yeah.
And to me it's just normal, and that's why when I saw that Declan Shelby had done the art on one of the books, I was like, oh, I definitely have to have that, because I do a lot of reviewing of Declan's books and he just pops up everywhere. So I know that I'm busy because we do, between the live streaming and the videos and the reviews, I do a lot of work. And I'm like, he has somehow found how to do even more work than I can even imagine, or even that Ken does. He does even more than I do, which is insane, because I'm just like it feels like every week I'm either reviewing something he wrote, something he drew, or there was a variant copy of something for him. It's amazing, like the amount of work he does.
Yeah, he's a beast, and I'm so thankful and grateful that he was able to fit us in. Like I've been buying his work for years. I think his Terminator stuff right now is like really interesting and cool. Mystique is great. So like I'm very honored that he took the time to fit our weird little dick blasting book into his schedule.
Well, I do the Terminator book, and I love what he's doing there, especially since it's so much different than what you would expect. But I'm also doing Thundercats, and I'm a huge Thundercats fan. So let's be honest, that's one of my favorite things. But let's get back to the questions. Enough about Declan Shelby. Let's get back to Shit Kickers.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing that maybe some people don't know about this is that you created music for this project. How did that process come about?
I sure did. So so I've played music my whole life, and high school I was in bands. When I, in my early 20s, I was in a Brooklyn band called Hound's Basket. I was the drummer. Just real dirtbags, you know what I mean? But in a cool way, and not a problematic way. But during quarantine, in 2020, I created sort of my own project called Radmobile, which is a Encino Man reference, which also makes its way into Shit Kickers, with Dylan talking about wheezing the juice, which is also an Encino Man reference. big Encino Man fan. So during, lockdown, I wrote and recorded a whole album and put it out on Spotify and all the other digital platforms. But then, like, as I was creating Shit Kickers, I was like, especially when we got our rights back from the publisher and decided to do it through Zoop, I was like, you know what, let's just like really go all in and just make it really just our own thing. And so I just put together kind of a little soundtrack, theme song. There's no vocals in it or anything, but it is available to listen to on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. It's called Chum Bucket, and we used it in the trailer. And yeah, it's just sort of like another layer of making this a DIY project was really fun for me to do. So yeah,
it's definitely rad. But on top of that, I also want to point out, anytime that you can mix in some Pauly Shore, that's the separation of any great generation. I think it's not really age or your beliefs. It comes down to where you fall on the Pauly Shore line.
Yeah,
like if you were too late to the party and you don't realize that Pauly Shore was, pretty much the biggest pop icon in the world for a little while, I feel bad for you.
Listen,
whether it was either older or younger, our generation, we had Pauly Shore.
Fond memories of seeing in the Army Now in theaters. I love the Weasel. So yeah, it's fun. Like, and if you ever listen to, I don't know how deep some Pauly Shore fans go, but of course his mother was Mitzi Shore, the owner of the Comedy Store, who's like hugely influential in a lot of the comedians that we love. So hearing him talk about like comedy history and all that stuff it's very fascinating to me. But yeah, big Pauly Shore fan.
Absolutely, me as well.
Yeah, I say you can't go wrong with him. Like, you grew up in that era in the 90s. Like, he's a staple. Like, he's part of that whole history.
Yeah, like I don't know how you can hate him. You know?
Oh no, completely. So let's talk a little bit about the art on this book, because I did got a couple of the preview pages up here, and this is from issue number 1, which everybody should be clicking on that QR code right now or clicking the liner notes of this episode. And talking about Andrea's art has been spectacular on this. So when you're crafting sci-fi worlds, like, what is the process for this? Is it just kind of like you have a rough outline and just pass it along, or is it just kind of like, just let the artists kind of run with their imagination and just kind of critique after?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say critique. Like, it's honestly been very collaborative, but we joke all the time how I'll send a script and sort of give like, especially when we were developing, like, for example, for Dylan, our lead character, his only real physical descriptor was like, he's never heard a guitar without distortion. And like, that's not a physical descriptor, but I feel like it encompasses his character. And so Andrea's interpretation of that, I think, comes to light in what you see in the book. And for Skiz, it was, she's a kind of a sloth-like alien creature. She's small and fierce. But we talked a lot about the sort of general vibes, which is kind of like a retro futuristic world, but everything is like dingy and shitty, like inspired sort of by the original trilogy in Star Wars, where everything's like used, except like everything's not used here as much as it's just like falling apart. Right? Everything, like all the consoles and the ships and stuff are just very Commodore 64 and just like really just on their last legs. But I really wanted to give him the freedom to design the world and the characters in a way that he would enjoy, because it turns out when your co-creator enjoys what they're doing, they turn in really great work.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the intention. And then what's interesting is, as specifically in this first issue, as the world was sort of coming together, and certain elements, specifically like in the bowels of the precinct, you see sort of like squid tentacles and stuff, and all these things, and all that stuff really inspired me in the future issues that I had yet to write. So like a lot of the work that he turned in early on really changed kind of the trajectory of the narrative and the characters, because I was inspired by what he had done and I wanted him to do more of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's like kind of speaks to why comics are so great. Just like the collaborative element of it. And you can come in with an idea or whatever, but once you see the art come back, you might be completely inspired to go in a new direction. And that was definitely the case here. And Andrea and our colorist Sabrina Filieri, who, you know, he knows personally, and they have a very close relationship in terms of back and forth on what they're looking for in the art. I think they just really captured something truly unique. And especially as the issues go on, they really just find their groove, and it's given a visual language to the book that I'm really excited about and very proud to be a part of. And I think people aren't ready for them. I keep saying that they're future superstars, you know, and I'm so lucky to have them on board here. I can't say enough good things about how this book looks.
Yeah, I say, like, we've been fortunate enough that we've read issues 1 and 2, no spoilers, but like it is absolutely impressive about like what they do with the world building and like the little details. Like you talked upon it when Dylan has to go down to the basement and what he finds there, and just it's just like the little small stuff, which I mean, I always look for, just because like I'm so used to seeing like, okay, what Easter eggs can an artist plant in a story here, and then just kind of see, but it's so detailed that you're just finding new elements, and it's just adding more to the story about like, you know, where their journey takes them. And then when they start meeting, as things are going on and new characters are coming into play, like it just adds more to this about how big this world really is that you're building. And it's only been 2 issues too. I think that's like the most impressive thing I picked up on thus far.
Thank you for saying that. That's awesome. Yeah.
So obviously, you know, you kind of had the inspirations for it earlier, but this is, you know, Shit Kickers is kind of like there's a sci-fi element to it, and to a lesser extent, let's be honest, the Pedestrain has a little of a sci-fi cosmic element. There's a teaser, buy the trade paperback, and then make sure you also go and sign up and get Shit Kickers as well. So you spend some money, folks. Let's be honest here. It's
Give
not
me
time
your money.
you have all the money's over the back.
You know, bills to pay.
You know, there's sacks of money that needs to be delivered. So therefore, make it happen. I think Danhausen would appreciate.
Yes.
So, with that being said, what as a writer, what draws you to kind of write the kind of goes to the genre of sci-fi, like kind of in that realm?
That's a great question. I mean, as you can see behind me, I have a lot of Star Wars stuff. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But I think it's just the aspect of sci-fi where you can do anything, you know, whether it's cosmic, like in the Pedestrain, I would say is like kind of more cosmic sci-fi, or Shit Kickers is more sort of like a gritty boots on the ground sci-fi, and seeing it sort of from like kind of like a grunt's perspective, even though there is the cosmic stuff that's going on. Our characters are like not involved in that. And I think it's just the aspect of being able to do anything and explore any themes is just really pretty attractive. It's just, and you can do like squids in space or what, you know, anything is possible. And that's really fascinating. A lot of pitches that I've, you know, haven't gone anywhere or are in progress, a lot of them deal with this sort of cosmic idea of like, you know, where do we belong in the universe, and and all these sort of more heady ideas. But it's just, I don't know, it's really interesting to me to explore that kind of stuff.
Well, I think it just allows your imagination to run wild as a creator, like to have that kind of free reign to just really push, you know, the boundaries, so to speak.
Yeah.
And just and there's nothing wrong with it, because like with the sci-fi genre, I think you get away with a little more than you do with any other one, and that just allows more fun for you as a writer to go like, oh, I want to try this. Like, I don't know how this will work, but hey, why not? Like, we'll give it a shot. It's not going to like throw the book off, you know, the axis, and then it goes completely in a different direction. So I think anything like that has got to be a big win.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think you've already alluded to, we know issues 1 and 2 are out right now. You said you've gotten up to issue 6. How long do we suspect the series would go for, as long as everybody's buying it?
So 6 is definitely the conclusion of this sort of first arc, I guess you could say. And then we'll see where it goes from there. I mean, the way that this story ends definitely lends itself to future stories with these characters. But yeah, it really depends on how these campaigns go. So like right now, the plan is we're crowdfunding for issues 1 and 2, which, you know, because everything is completed, we're hoping to fulfill basically immediate, like go to the printer, get that fulfilled to all the backers, and then launch the next campaign for issues 3 and 4 and continue releasing them on Global Comics so people can be invested. And do that successively until this first arc is completed, and then TBD.
Right. No, that's
Hopefully we can put out a trade. Maybe that'll be through a more traditional publisher. I'm wide open right now, which is kind of exciting, like to sort of free yourself from the more traditional constraints of comic book publishing. Like, I don't know. I like being open with like, yeah, we're open to whatever deals people want to bring to us. That's cool. Like the book is basically complete. We've done all the work. If you want to put it out on a wider market, that would be awesome. But also we'll figure out a way to get a complete edition, you know, together. So I would love to do more. I know Andrea would love to do more. We have been talking about like a separate new project together. But I know that for a fact, you know, he's in Italy. He could not make this recording, but he sends his best. But I know for a fact that he loves these characters. Dylan in particular is just like his favorite little idiot. And I know that he would like to do more. So I don't know, fingers crossed.
No, definitely. I think the more fans that pick up these issues, they're gonna fall in love with the series, because it literally catches you right from the jump. Like, because you know there's the quirkiness of the humor, but then you start diving into the story and where it takes you from 1 to 2. And like I said, no spoilers, everybody. You need to go sign up for the book. It is well worth checking, and it's definitely going to hook you that you're going to want to see more of these characters. Like, that's, you know, how layered the story is, because like I say, at first you see it, and yeah, it does have, you know, the shoot them in the, you know, below the belt, so to speak, but it still hits the bullseye where it needs to hit. And I think coming out of the gate, that's such a great thing to do.
That's awesome to hear you say, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes. Now I promise the hijacking.
Yep.
So I'm going to read the question that is written, and then as a good improv, I'm going to hit the and. So the question that is written is: Dylan and Skiz are an unlikely pair. Who is your favorite pairing in all of comics? However, I am adding adding on to this. You see, we follow each other on Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading through, which I should be more active in talking and conversating on Blue Sky. I realize this after the fact, especially about pro wrestling, since that's the other thing. I do comics and pro wrestling here.
Yes.
And of course, I saw you were reacting to the Royal Rumble. Oh man, he watches Raw Wrestling. I love this. So I'm going to add the and to this, and we'll talk. I'm going to ask you your opinions about the Royal Rumble after. But Dylan and Skiz, as the unlikely pair, who is your favorite pairing in all of comics? And then who is your favorite pairing in all of pro wrestling?
Oh, man. I wish I got this question in advance so I could think about it. That's tough. Off the top of my head, I really love Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne just as a pairing. Damian is my favorite Robin, but it's specifically like in that era, you know, the Batman era, RIP era, when Dick was Batman for a while, just like their dynamic in the Grant Morrison Batman and Robin series. Just like, I love that stuff. I love how different they are, but how committed they are to each other. And then in wrestling, oh man, my mind's going to Goldust and Booker T. But you know, I really like the Odd Couple pairings. That's really fun. You know, there's a lot of great tag teams and stuff like that, but I feel like, or even like Kane and X-Pac back in the day, despite how I feel about Kane in the present.
Pretty much,
you know, but yeah, it's just like, I feel like the odd couple pairing always works in any scenario, whether it's literally the odd couple or it's wrestling or comic book characters and their sidekicks. It's always a blast.
The odd couple is always a good pairing, especially in wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, even in comics too. But I mean, we've talked about that in other books. You know, whether we're talking Vampiro or talking about it in as many other books as we've done, where we do the crossover wrestling, especially on this show. And it's always like there's such a perfect mix for each other. Like really, pro wrestling is live action comic book. In a lot of ways, good versus evil. You can mix some things in. You have colorful characters. They have different backgrounds. If I, like going back, like growing up, as when I was a child in the 80s, we had all the colorful tag teams like the Killer Bees. And then you find out as an adult, it wasn't that they were clever. It's just that it was B. Brian Blair. And, they were like, yeah, we're just going to use the names. So yeah, no, I was always a fan of, as far as duos of Too Cool. Because come on.
Yeah. They're
the rest in peace, Grandmaster Sexay, but Scotty.
I've
always been like, as much as I love technical wrestling, I also love a good fun gimmick. And speaking of technical wrestling, you were talking about the Royal Rumble on Blue Sky. What was your thoughts on this year's Royal Rumble?
It's so funny because earlier today I did a friend of mine does a wrestling podcast called Somewhere in the Ring, and I was a guest on that show to talk about the Royal Rumble. So I'm primed and ready to get into it. I thought it was a great show. It was definitely, specifically the men's Rumble was one of the best that I've seen in a while, in terms of like really offering some surprises and elevating new talent. And even the women's Rumble, I know there's some fans aren't happy about Charlotte winning, but like, I don't know, that's sort of a more traditional, like, A to B plot line of what WrestleMania is going to look like. And then in the men's Rumble, we have Jey Uso being elevated. But then even in the women's Rumble, there was so much NXT talent who really got like some time to shine, that I really, really appreciated. Roxanne Perez being in there until the very end, setting a new record. All that stuff was just a blast. I felt bad for the tag team match. I mean, it's always tough to be sandwiched in between two Rumbles now. Yeah. The ladder match was great. But overall, I thought like the event was really solid. And I had a great time.
It's weird because we'll be talking about it on Thursday when we do Wrestling Night Live right here, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Cheap plug for myself. And Ken will be on that show as well.
Yeah, I'll be here.
So we'll be breaking it down. But the one thing that it's going to probably come up again. The one thing that I really thought is the dichotomy of the fickleness of wrestling fans in this. Mind you, I'm with you. I thought that they did a great job telling stories. They did a great job of elevating talent. I thought they did a great job overall surprising us and giving us, not surprising the traditional Royal Rumble, like, oh my God, this person's in the Rumble.
Right.
But more or less like, oh, Jey Uso actually won it. Or,
right.
Roxanne Perez sets a record. She's last in the ring and she's in NXT. I mean, obviously, eventually she'll be up on the main roster. So I thought, and then there was all these matches you could see that they're kind of like tempting you with before WrestleMania season that they really started to put together in the Rumble match. But it goes back to like going on the internet, which I try to avoid. And on one end of it, you have the people mad that Charlotte won because that's the establishment. And why did we run this? What it's going to do? But on the other hand, they were mad that Jey Uso won, going that why didn't we go with the establishment guy and John Cena?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, well, speaking to like the comparisons between comics and wrestling, it's like that extends to the fandom also. Like I think that oftentimes fans of really anything don't actually know what they want, and sometimes when they get the thing that they don't know that they want, they don't react positively, but then retroactively, it ends up being like a great story. I think a great example is even last year with Rock getting involved and all this stuff, and everyone was so pissed, but then ended up being great. Like the final boss stuff was awesome, and the way they turned all of that into like a story was really great. And so I think, like, I don't know, fans are fickle of whether it's wrestling or comics or Star Wars or whatever it might be. I just think like everyone needs to chill out and like let
Yeah.
the stories happen and then judge them afterwards.
Let
Of
it
course,
breathe.
it's never going to happen, but like that's, I wish it was like that. And to your point of like staying off the internet, I don't know. It's so weird because I, as a kid, remember being so pumped, like, oh my God, I can talk about Star Wars with everyone on the internet. And like, I only have a few friends in real life who want to like get into the nitty gritty of, the lore with me, but on the internet, there's infinite possibilities. And now I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about Star Wars on the internet.
Yeah.
It's so weird how it's like kind of like backtracked.
It's so weird about like what draws out, like when you throw a comment out there and if you're happy about something.
Mhm.
Like, like I say, that's one thing that's been throwing me off, like as of late. Like you want to be excited about WWE, well, you got to deal with AEW fans going crazy about it. And it's like, well, no, I'm not saying anything about you. You're fed. Same thing with like Marvel and DC to a degree, and Star Wars is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Like I avoid even saying anything about that. But it's just like, it's so weird to see that happen. And especially like, I try when we're on there talking, and one thing we always do here at Nerd Initiative is pop culture positivity. It's like we just try searching out for like the positive talk and getting that conversation going. Because I think a lot of fans of whatever fandom are kind of scared these days to get out there. And it's like, no, you should be able to go out there and be a fan and enjoy what you enjoy and not have to worry about it.
We got to remember what was said at the Rumble. Probably the best Pat McAfee line is when Alexa Bliss made her surprise return and Michael Cole goes, "Oh, I thought she wasn't coming back." And Pat McAfee's like, "You need to stop reading the dirt sheets, Cole." That's you just have to stay away from like certain things. And like I said it first when we were watching the Rumble, and this is why the moment happened and why the moment was so awesome, is I was at WrestleMania 40. I watched Cody finish the story and I watched the crowd, which is, for somebody who used to do stuff in pro wrestling, I like to watch the crowd sometimes. And I was a part of the crowd. I was enjoying myself, but I was also watching everybody around me. And as Cody won, the outpouring was amazing and nobody left. Like everybody sat there and sang his theme song on loop for about 10 minutes. Nobody left their seat. Usually people are running for the exit when the show ends. Fast forward to the Royal Rumble. You want to know why Jey Uso won? He wins and nobody leaves.
Right.
Everybody is yeeting in the crowd. Everybody's having a great time and they want to be part of the moment. And that is what you need to bring to the table. And that doesn't just work for wrestling. It works for all entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get people talking and get people in a positive way, reacting, that gleefulness, like when you're a fan, when you're reading something, it comes through. Or if you're watching something and you're like, man, I really love this. And the downside to everybody's point about the internet, sometimes I think where we all have to take a step back is that don't let it steal your joy. If you love something and you thought it was great, continue to think it was great. It doesn't matter what X, Y, and Z, because a lot of the people complaining aren't even real fans.
Yeah,
it sounds bad to say. There is some obviously that are, but there's a lot of them that are just like they want the reaction. I can tell you this is crappy. I'm going to give you the reaction.
For sure. You make that an emotional connection, and that's very important. And to have someone else coming in and be like, actually, you shouldn't have that reaction is so stupid.
Yeah.
And, like that can really damage someone's relationship to a thing, whether it's wrestling or a certain property or story or whatever. And no one should be impeding on anyone's joy like that, and that's, I think, a large part why I just sort of have stepped back from the internet in general and encourage other people to do so and just kind of take things on your own terms and enjoy them for why you enjoy them. And I say this is like, I think growing up as like a prequel, Star Wars prequel defender helped me a lot in this regard of like, I understand why you don't like this, but who's laughing now when like exactly what was predicted in the prequels is what's happening in real politics. So I win.
Always my favorite argument is when I don't like Star Wars when it became political. And I'm like, political, my friends. You must have missed the story was here and it just went like this.
Well, that's like a whole, I mean, that's true of like Captain America fans or like any superhero fans, just like kind of missed the point completely. And if you're at that level, like I feel like there's no
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can say or do for you that's going to change your mind. Like, you just don't have any media literacy, and that's not my problem. You know?
Yeah.
I was going to say my personal favorite recently was The Boys. The last season of The Boys. Man, the outrage that happened there. You're like, you guys didn't get it the whole time. Ah, damn.
Unreal.
I thought it was up in the front. I don't understand why you didn't get that, but
especially The Boys, which is like very, very overt, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a subtle show. It's not a subtle comic. I just don't get. I don't get it.
I don't know. It's just, sometimes it's just best to just stay in the comic shops and just read some good books.
Yeah, pretty much.
What's interesting is, like, if you go to the comic shop, at least in my experience, like, everyone's like pumped to be there and doesn't. Yeah. No one's like complaining about whatever Marvel is doing or anything like that. It's just like everyone's like excited for their books that week and to talk about it with other fans,
Yeah. It's the best experience. Literally, like, just going in and everybody's talking, everybody's amped up about, like, have you read this? And you just, like, you start bouncing off those conversations. Yeah. Like, I wound up spending like way more time down there than I like to, just because it's like with my schedule, but it's like, I love having those interactions because it's like, this reminds you of like why you became a fan of anything.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like people crapping on things as people selling things, not selling like, oh, buy it. Like, hey, like, have you tried this yet?
Yeah.
Have you read this book? Like, you don't really hear, but like, oh man, that book you're reading sucks. Try this. No, it's usually like, oh, you like that? Well, if you like that, check this book out. And I love those interactions. Those are the best because I've come across some great stuff that I didn't even know. I mean, Ken usually sends a lot of stuff my way. Yeah. Like I said, I do a lot of indie books. So as I'm looking through what my next week is going to look like, I'm like, oh, that looks like I'd like to read that. And that looks like I'd like to read that. So that's kind of the nice part about reviewing books. I get to be like, oh, I want to read that. I want to try that one.
Is the good thing about being an editor. I get to go tell people, like, you need to check this book out. And it's in indie. And if they don't read it, like, they'll come back and be like, where have I been all this time? I'm like, well, this is why you need to catch up. So here we go.
Gotta read those indie books.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, man. There's more to life than the big two, especially when Shit Kickers is on sale. And we need to go support this book. So wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, because it'll be on podcast form tomorrow, make sure to click on the QR code. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to click on the links in the bio here. Go sign up for this campaign. Trust me, it's well worth your money. Fantastic art, great story. And it's something that you're going to see the cover. You're going to think one thing, but the more you dive into the story, it's something completely else. So, Joey, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We definitely have to have you back on and talk some more Shit Kickers and some more books down the road.
Thank you so much. Anytime, literally, just let me know. I'm indebted to you guys, so I'm happy to be here.
No, we're happy to support you. You do fantastic stuff. So, like I say, it is our honor to have you on and definitely talk about that because I think of one of these days we have to do a deep dive about the Pedestrain.
Absolutely, yeah. Sean and I are down to do that whenever you're ready.
Listen, I mean, I got to meet both of you at New York Comic Con. Mm-hmm. I've been able to interact. It was like the one thing when I was given the book by Ken, he was like, "This is right up your alley. You're gonna like this." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm like, at first, like I read the first issue, and I'm gonna be honest, the first time I read it, I'm like, "What did I just read?" And that's not a bad thing. That's just kind of like what. So I reread it
because it hits you, yeah.
So I reread it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is fantastic."
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of like, and it just snowballed, and then it was just. And then I got real sad when it was over, but whatever. That's why it's like you get back to work, make more Pedestrian for myself. I don't care about the other fans. It's just me. Like, let's be honest. I mean, we'll give you more awards if you.
Keep them coming. We'll keep sending them to Magma and be like, hey, look, more awards. Come on. Give us more.
Like, all kidding aside, though, we didn't. That was a legit vote. Like, that wasn't something that like I didn't even. I can't say that anybody swayed that vote that was on staff.
No, just even fans that we've talked to online have been singing the praises of the Pedestrian since issue 1. So awesome. It's been something like I get DMs all the time about like, how did you find out about this book? Where do I find out more? And it's just like, like, here's the link, go buy it. Like, really, you'll trust me, you will not be disappointed.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, and I think we're gonna have the same thing going on with Shit Kickers. So you definitely want to make sure you go sign up for this book because we're going to end this like we always do on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shops and you have a great issue in your hands that you got off Zoop called Shit Kickers #1, and you see somebody struggling to find a great issue to pick up, hand yours off to them. Tell them Turn a Page. We'll see you next time.
All right, that's right. I'm out.